If you want to protect yourself, get a double-barrel shotgun. Gun violence in this country is an epidemic.
Watch out! He's got a gun! He's going to steal your permission!
Are you proposing taking away their guns?
Yes.
Enough prayers. Time for some action.
You want to take everyone's guns away.
Bingo. Enough prayers. Time for some action.
We're going to take your AR-15.
We're not going to give up. We'll find you. Gun violence is an epidemic.
Yeah, just jingle after jingle. We got one more.
I think the deer wearing Kevlar vests.
A lot of gun control
fun.
talk.
Not only is your voice pitched down for me, but also all the jingles are.
Oh, yeah.
So these are all like a new experience, hearing these an octave lower.
Well, I mean, I don't think it's a whole octave. It's definitely a few cents, though. But, okay. Matthew McConaughey was at the White House telling everybody about gun control. There's a minute and 10 minutes. Yeah.
We need to invest in mental health care. We need safer schools. We need to restrain sensationalized media coverage. We need to restore our family values. We need to restore our American values. And we need responsible gun ownership. Responsible gun ownership. We need background checks.
We have them.
We need to raise the minimum age to purchase an AR-15 rifle to 21. We need a waiting period for those rifles. We need red flag laws and consequences for those who abuse them. These are reasonable, practical, tactical regulations to our nation, states, communities, schools, and homes. Responsible gun owners are fed up with the Second Amendment being abused and hijacked by some deranged individuals. These regulations are not a step back. They're a step forward for a civil society and the Second Amendment.
Yeah, he's pointing his finger, too. And. Wow.
And. He's really putting the McConaughey stank on some of that.
This is the Democrat method, right? It's bringing famous actors to deliver a message. But, even then it's sort of, I don't know, he's sort of towing the line, trying to, I guess, not be so partisan in his message, but...
Well, that is the thing. It's a little bit different of a strategy. Mm-hmm. Now, is he an actual Democrat? Is he a registered Democrat?
I don't know.
Why don't you look that up real quick?
I don't know all the ins and outs of McConaughey's politics, but I'll look it up, yeah.
Well, he's been moving in that direction for a while. He was playing with the idea of running for a Texas governorship or some various public office, and that's probably part of why he's doing this. Now, of course, Uvalde was his hometown, so he's kind of the obvious spokesperson for this response. I will say, compared to other Hollywood actors talking about guns, he is at least doing a better job of not towing the sort of the craziness, the Democrat craziness of gun control, topics. He's talking about stuff that is, I don't know. Again, the whole problem with the gun control conversation is that the danger is the slippery slope. You start making more regulations, then, they just start working on the next set of regulations. And that's at least as far as the political strategy has been, mostly by the gun lobby and those who they've either convinced or paid to agree with them. It's the very idea of adding any new gun laws is just, it's just one step in a long row of steps that will, the fear is, end with complete banning of guns. Now, he does a great job of coming from the perspective of responsible gun owners. And he's actually stated in the past, this was during one of the news cycles of the shootings in the past couple of years, he talks about how he does like guns and does own guns and things like this, which of course is hilarious because every Hollywood actor has a gun, whether they like to talk about it or not. That's just sort of how the world is. But, talking about how Second Amendment responsible gun owners are tired of the Second Amendment being used and abused by psycho killers. Yeah, sure. Okay. But he didn't necessarily give it from the other side either, which is, they're also tired of being labeled as some sort of terrorist by your sort of average Democrat. And again, he's bringing up the basic talking points, background checks. Yes, you got to have background checks. The only time you don't have a background check is if it's a private party sale, if you're in a state that allows that. But yeah, of course you get a background check. Waiting periods. Yeah, lots of states require waiting periods. The raising of the age of gun ownership I think that's it's actually an interesting topic. It's an interesting concept that I don't necessarily throw out, right away, because we have seen most of these shooters, at least the recent ones, they're all 18 years old. They're all, they're in this moment. Much like when you're 21 and you're finally allowed to drink, there's sort of a stereotypical overdo it period. Where if you've abstained, followed the law, been a good boy or girl, and you have your first drink when you're 21, there's sort of the stereotypical overdo it thing. You've been building it up.
Was that your experience, the overdo it?
No, I've just heard of it. I've heard of people going through this
because I was going to say, very different experience for me. I was like, oh, there's a line that I just crossed, or what? I feel no difference.
Didn't even notice, right?
Didn't even notice.
Yeah. So, and I think that has to play into the sort of psychological profile of what we've seen with a lot of these really young mass shooters. The story is almost always, yeah, I turned 18 and he turned 18 and he bought some guns on his 18th birthday and went nuts. Now, we trust 18-year-olds to go off to war and fight. So if you're
die
gonna
for your country, but hey,
right,
owning a gun,
you can shoot. Yeah, you can shoot. Enemies of our, country or whatever. Not even enemies of our country.
Enemies
just
of our.
You can shoot. Yeah, right. You can kill somebody overseas so some rich guy can pump more oil or something. But you can't have a gun at home. That doesn't make too much sense. But raising the, maybe if you do it in sort of a tiered system where, AR-15s or something, you got to be 21. But I'm also an old man, so none of that really matters.
Well, the thing that the comparison that I've heard out there, which is interesting, is you need to be 25 years old to rent a car. I remember that thinking, whoa, 25?
Isn't that crazy?
That is so weird. 18, you can buy a gun, but you got to be 25 to rent a car. Like, all right.
Yeah. Well, and it's funny because that is pretty strictly because of economic reasons. It's for insurance purposes.
Yeah.
That's the law. There's no actual safety, data, but behind the fact that you got. Well, I guess there is because that's.
Yeah.
Sorry, you lost me there for a second.
The Sun here has an article that just published yesterday. Red or blue, is Matthew McConaughey a Republican or Democrat? And basically it says that he isn't really publicly committed to anything, but they mention what was this? In a podcast with Russell Brand in December of 2020 when he criticized far-left Democrats and Hollywood following former President Trump's 2016 election win. So... he's probably Republican if he runs, but he could be the Democrat that brings everybody, brings some Republicans to switch sides because, hey man,
it sounds like no matter what he runs as, he's not, people are going to either be mad or people are going to switch sides.
Yeah,
and that's kind of the beauty of not being in the sort of partisan system, which if he is critical of that, you got to give him some credit for that.
Sure. Yeah, somebody in the chat mentioned that McConaughey reminded them of a Newsom, and I actually had that exact same thing on my phone. Actually, I have a picture of Newsom and a picture of McConaughey like a week ago.
Greasy, slick back hair.
The greasy slick back is making him look, and I'm sure Newsom's watching like, oh, get some tips from Matthew McConaughey.
That's funny.
I bet you the next time Newsom is publicly speaking, he'll have some McConaughey twang. He'll try it out.
Yeah, he'll just accidentally be like, all right. We got another drought in California. All right. Yeah. So anyways, I will say on the spectrum of conversation when it comes to gun laws or gun reform in the U.S., he is sort of standing as that,
bridge maker.
Third. Yeah, he's kind of doing a bridge building exercise. Most of what he said is not necessarily the most inflammatory talk about gun control, but
invoked some American values and family values,
it's all the
right
which
thing.
are
The
both
conservative presuppositions are all there. So yeah, which
honestly surprised me. It surprised me a little bit. I was expecting him to go full Hollywood lefty, but he really is kind of right.
Not McConaughey. He knows his target market. He knows.
Right.
I mean, look at the Interstellar. Look at the character he played. Just out.
Well, more than anything, I wonder if this will start to shift the conversation on the left or the right. We'll be wanting to keep an eye out for a trend in the conversation.
Yeah.
So, but there was another story regarding his visit to the White House. This was on NPR.org.
Mm-hmm. The headline here is the story of Uvalde victim Green Shoes captures the White House's attention. And if you recall last episode, we covered the color green as a sort of a signaling and all the connections to the occult and the mythology and all that kind of stuff.
Well, and not just the color green, but the use of green by the elites in sort of a ritual way.
Right. With the queen walking out in all green. A pair of green Converse shoes, drawings, and personal pictures are just some of the remaining artifacts of the victims of the Uvalde, Texas shooting. Actor and Uvalde native Matthew McConaughey and his wife Camilla Alves McConaughey discussed some of these items during an at times emotional news conference on Tuesday at the White House. And then it talks about Matthew McConaughey. One of those victims was 10-year-old Maite Rodriguez, a lover of animals and the environment. She dreamed of becoming a marine biologist. She often wore a pair of green, her favorite color, high-top Converse shoes with a heart drawn in marker over her right toes. Camilla Alves McConaughey held up a pair of green Converse shoes during her husband's news conference. Quote, "These are the same green Converse on her feet that turned out to be the only clear evidence that could identify her after the shooting," Matthew McConaughey said, pointing to his wife. It's unclear whether the green sneakers were the same ones worn by Maite or whether they were similar shoes of the same brand and style. Anna Rodriguez.
Maite.
Anna Rodriguez, Maite's mother, has shared on Facebook that her daughter's dream was to attend Texas A&M University Corpus Christi to study marine biology. The school has since created a scholarship in memory of Maite that will go to a student from Uvalde who pursues a degree in marine biology. And
by the way, real quick, I don't know if you've gotten the notes. I've got many notes from people, especially in Texas. It's pronounced Uvalde.
Uvalde. Okay.
Uvalde, yeah. Apparently, it's very important that we pronounce this correctly.
Okay, Uvalde, me-valde, they-valde. So it goes on here and talks about just more of the victims, and it's very heartwarming and stuff, and sad, very sad. It truly is sad. So sad's like the episode title. But I just thought it was. I don't know. The pattern that we covered with the Queen coming out in all green, and then now we got the green shoes. We got the Boston Celtics in the NBA Finals. Sorry, but yes.
So what is up with the green shoes? Are we connecting this to the green of the Queen?
I am just saying
these mainstream
it's very
news cycle narratives, including green as a sort of touchstone to the visuals being presented.
Yeah, and we're getting links from people like Jam. Thank you, producer Jam, and he sent a whole bunch of stuff where it connects green back to Osiris. And having to do with resurrection and rebirth and all this stuff. And then we have the queen. Actually, she's missing another event. Her health is declining. And I don't know. There just seems to be, with all the big sort of world-shaking things going on, the color green, or green clothing in particular, just seems to be popping up. And it's just a very interesting thing. Interesting sort of, I don't know. I'm not saying there's anything to it. Maybe it's just pure coincidence, but just something to point out.
I think the shoes aspect of it too is as a very poignant image.
Yeah.
Because that's kind of, whenever there's a disaster, whenever there's a war, whenever there's anything, they always show pictures of shoes,
hanging,
like a single,
exactly,
a single child's shoe in the middle of a street, is a classic sort of photojournalist type of thing to show, just to really impact the emotions. You've got the gun violence protest people have done instances where they leave pairs of shoes out in front of the White House lawn or whatever, or Capitol building, wherever they did that. Leaving shoes. There's just something about empty shoes that is really a poignant imagery that, like, somebody used to be in these shoes, and that was very intense. I mean, I saw it compared on a meme too, with the pro-gun control people leaving shoes as a protest to make a point about, the victims of gun violence, and then comparing that to pictures from, the Holocaust, where the big piles of shoes, being like, this is what happens when you take people's guns away, type of thing, which is a little much, a little heavy, but message received. And there's really something about shoes. Empty shoes that are really powerful communication tool, and perhaps, like all communication tools, can be used for propagandistic purposes. So
even part of the armor of God. There's some.
That's right. They got shoes
to footwear and what they do.
That's right. So let's see here. Let's talk about Canada real quick. What do you say?
Yeah.
Okay.
So Canada.
Yes. So we've got plenty of Canadian listeners. We're sorry we haven't touched on this before, but it's been kind of hard, actually, to get some of the specific info that I was hoping for. But we all have heard at this point that Trudeau has introduced legislation, or is pushing through legislation, or the sort of Canadian equivalent of an executive order, to freeze handgun sales, specifically sales and transfer, and actually even ownership in some cases. This is coming from thestar.com, and the headline is "What You Need to Know About Canada's Proposed Ban on Handgun Sales." And this came out at the end of last month, so it's a little bit older. And this was another interesting part of the research on this, was that the moves that they're making now, and they're using shootings in the U.S. as their justification for, have been in the works for quite some time. So let's get into it. The federal government of Canada has introduced a new gun control bill that it is billing as the most significant change to firearms legislation in Canada in a generation. It says when Bill C-21 becomes law, it will help keep guns out of communities and build a safer country. Here's a look at some of the content and context around the new law. Why now? The Liberals won in the 2015 election with a platform that promised tighter controls on firearms. That stood in contrast to the then governing Conservatives, who had dismantled the National Long Gun Registry over concerns it was an expensive undertaking and did little to help combat gun crime. Over 7 years in office and in the 2 subsequent elections, the Liberals have introduced new laws and made new promises to curb gun violence. That became a wedge issue in last summer's federal election campaign when the Liberals accusing the Conservatives of wanting to end restrictions on weapons used in mass shootings. Aaron O'Toole's squirming over the subject during the campaign would later become one of the factors that cost him the Conservative leadership. The Tories are now in a leadership race in which gun control is among the issues being debated. But the Liberals also face pressure to make good on their campaign promises, especially to revive their last gun bill, also known as C-21, which they failed to pass before the last election. The shooting deaths of 10 Black Americans in Buffalo on May 14, and the 19 students and 2 teachers in Uvalde, Texas on May 24th put a renewed focus on the progress of the Liberals' efforts since winning the re-election. So, interesting how it was 2 American shootings that, again, is being used to push through the Canadian legislation. Let's see here. So what are they doing? Among its provisions, the bill would ensure those involved in domestic violence or stalking incidents would have their firearms license revoked. Statistics suggest 1 in 4 female victims of firearms-related crimes are victimized by a current or former intimate partner. Advocates have said for years that getting guns out of those perpetrators' hands is essential. So basically a red flag law is what that is. But the centerpiece of the new bill is a national ban on the buying, selling, trading, or importation of handguns. Those who already have the required licenses to own and transport handguns would be able to keep them. However, the new law would mean that the number of legally registered handguns in Canada would be capped at an estimated 1.1 million. Whether a freeze on the legal acquisition of handguns would cut the number of crimes associated with them is hard to discern. Statistics Canada points out that the data collection on the provenance of guns is uneven across the country, and it's often not documented whether the guns used in a crime was initially obtained legally. Canada's Border Services Agency reported seizing 61,658 prohibited weapons in the 2021-2022 fiscal year. So that's the border agency. And there's like 60,000 guns taken in 1 year crossing the border, which is a lot of guns. The agency also has a GTA-specific unit, and in a briefing note prepared for a parliamentary study last year, reported that it had intercepted more than 3,700 improperly declared replica, restricted, or prohibited firearms since 2020. Okay, so what about stopping guns from coming in? Now, the bill would increase maximum prison sentences for gun smuggling and trafficking offenses to 14 years from 10 years. Okay. It would also change immigration rules so that those who commit gun crimes would be automatically ineligible to come to Canada. I think this part is very interesting because Canada, I don't know if you know this, Gons, but Canada has a pretty strict border policy. I don't know if it's still this way, but at one point, having even some fairly minor crimes on your record would bar you from going to but from being let into Canada. Like having a DUI, they wouldn't let you into Canada if you had a DUI, stuff like that.
If you got enough money and you know the right people, they can clean your record. I saw it on TV.
Sure. Okay, you've been watching Ozark, I guess. Let's see here. Yeah, so I find it strange that wasn't already a law. Like, you can't go into Canada if you have a DUI, but if you have a gun crime, you're allowed. Okay. The new law would prohibit the importation of ammunition. Yeah. The bill also proposes to add firearms offenses to the list of those that allow for wiretaps to better allow for investigations of gun violence. And this one I thought was fascinating. So, yeah. So if you are alleged to have a firearm offense, now it opens up the federal government's legally, mandated surveillance apparatus. And I thought this fit quite nicely with the Trudeau administration's, during the trucking protest, they had sort of the financial surveillance, and they could shut down your bank account, and they could freeze your assets if you were going to a protest, which is, I guess that happens when you got good gun laws. You can do things like that. But, if there's an alleged firearm offense, boom, you got full federal wiretap capabilities. So the surveillance aspect of it is pretty intense.
Oh, they can roll out the robots too.
Yeah. You get a little micro drone that gets to latch onto the inside of your sinus cavity and listens to everything you think about. And that's more or less it. It does talk about, they also have had a separate assault style weapon ban that they've been trying to get through. But at the end here, when will the new bill come into effect? The law must first pass by both the House and Commons and the Senate, while the minority Liberal government likely has the support of the New Democrats and Bloc Québécois to pass the bill. The Conservatives will be equally likely to try to stand in its way. In tandem with the bill, however, the government has also tabled regulations that would implement the freeze on handgun sales sooner. How soon is unclear. The regulations were only made public Tuesday, and there's no date specified in them. Only that they would come into force when they're registered. The government could not immediately answer how quickly that would happen, although it said Monday the freeze would be in place by this fall. So they're trying to do this quickly, and it's that one seems, they're tabling regulations that would be implemented to freeze handguns. Now, this was on the 31st of May, but there's this other article here from CTV News, ctvnews.ca. Vancouver Island gun store sees huge sales after Trudeau announces handgun freeze. And there's a lot of this, and it's so nice to know, no matter how different you Canadians try to be from Americans, there are some things that our North American neighbors that we just have in common, and that is when there's even a whiff of a gun control legislation going through. Time to go buy a gun, baby. It reads like this. The federal government's plans to put a national ban on handgun sales may have had the opposite effect on prospective buyers. A gun store in Campbell River, BC says it saw a huge surge in sales after Prime Minister Justin Trudeau announced the bill on May 30th. Quote, Mr. Trudeau announced it on Monday of last week, and we opened Tuesday morning, and there was a mad rush. We could hardly keep up with the traffic, said Kevin McCurry, co-owner of Gunsmoke. Quote, if his desire was to limit handgun sales, well, he was a salesman of the month for us, McCurry said. Quote, we sold probably 40 handguns last week. Normally, we would sell 1 or 2 a month. Whoa. Trudeau described the new legislation as the strongest gun control measure in Canada in more than 40 years. And then goes on about the freeze.
Just kind of taking I don't know if it's completely contrarian, but just thinking out loud here, if you're a social engineer and you want more conflict, like sort of the divide and conquer thing, and you want more violence just in your communities, how do you get people to buy guns? How do you get people who may not have ever bought a gun to go buy a gun? Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's to roll out guys like Trudeau, and you get to do both, right? You get to sort of have that the public arming themselves for, perceived, I don't know, some kind of conflict in the future. And then you also get Trudeau to sort of declare the most, I don't know, there are other countries that have, gun restriction laws and stuff like that, but just, you get to roll them out and say all the things that you want to say for that party or that side of the aisle to legislate guns in general. And you have sort of a perfect storm of setup for chaos, I don't know.
Yeah, and the gun lobby, the gun companies, which, spend millions and hundreds of millions of dollars to affect gun legislation. I mean, even the very threat of gun laws going into place is a huge boon for these companies. They benefit either way. It's a pretty good deal for those guys.
Yeah.
And you know, Canada already has some pretty intense licensing laws when it comes to guns. You know, you need a license for everything,
right?
Which is one difference between Canada and many of the U.S. states, depending where you are.